One of the big things that people have been afraid about with artificial intelligence is alignment faking. Now, this is a problem that I will admit that I have downplayed in the past because I have assumed that it would be solved, and that day has finally come. OpenAI, in association with Apollo Research, released this paper just yesterday, or I guess 2 days ago now, on the 15th, Stress Testing Deliberative Alignment for Anti-Scheming Training. Now, that's a mouthful, but really kind of the headline that I want to draw your attention to is right here. Deliberative alignment reduces covert action rates, and they tested it on O3, from 13% to 0.4%, and on O4 Mini from 8.7% to 0.3%. So while it did not fully eliminate covert actions, it very, very substantive move. So let's unpack what all of this means, and I'm also going to tell you very quickly how it worked. Now, obviously, this is a 94-page research paper, so we're not going to go over the whole thing. So let's get right into it. So first and foremost, one of the things that people have been afraid of is that AI would just fake alignment. It would just pretend to be aligned. And you see this even in simpler machine learning algorithms, even as simple as chips in tractors that use some kind of online machine learning to optimize fuel rates. This is a story that I heard from a meetup group many years ago, where this machine learning chip that was used on farm tractors basically learned that there was a flaw in the actual metallurgy of the chips and learned to exploit that to align itself or optimize the function that it was trying to optimize. And so you call this leakage is one way to describe what this problem is. Now, when you have a model that is smarter and planning and is operating in a far more sophisticated environment than just optimizing fuel and oxygen ratios for a tractor, that is what you would call a misalignment. So when you train these models, one of the primary things that you use to train them is reinforcement learning, which is you test the model over many iterations and you have a reward predictor that says, I like that behavior better than that one. Now, your reward predictor can still be gamed, and this is one of the primary problems. When your reward predictor, when your reinforcement learning schema only looks at the final answer and says, okay, that behavior looks aligned, then that it can pass. And so what they really found, that what I feel like is the core insight of this paper, is that they realized that if you just grade the final answer of how a model is performing, it will more often than not, up to 13% in O3's case, fake alignment. And by faking alignment, it says, okay, well, you arrived at a good enough answer, so we're just going to assume that the underlying model is aligned. But when you look at the chain of thought and other things, there's hidden actions. And so then they said, okay, well, how do we fix that? And so they created a three-step pipeline. I'm not going to get into the details of the pipeline, but in hindsight, it's an elegantly simple solution where it's just slightly more sophisticated than existing pipelines. But the core novelty of this new training scheme is, do you remember in math class when you would get an answer wrong for using the wrong process, where you had to show your work, show each step of the process, and then that methodology was just as important and sometimes more important than the actual getting the right answer? So, personal anecdote, in high school, I had the same math teacher every year that I took math. And so that was Mrs. Stewart, and she was, in hindsight, a good math teacher, but she didn't instill a passion for math, which is unfortunate. My life probably would have taken a very different course if I had actually learned that actually I enjoy math. Anyways, that's aside the point. The point is, though, is that more often than not, I would learn to derive the rules, but the wrong rules, and I would still get to the right answer. And she's like, I see what you're doing. You got to the right answer, but the wrong method, so it's still wrong. And I would get no credit for it. And I'm like, but I got the right answer. She's like, that's not the point. So this new training scheme, the entire point of that story is that this new training scheme that OpenAI cooked up works more like that, where it looks at every step and every bit of reasoning to say, okay, as you're deliberating this, have you actually internalized the principles and the ethics and the rules and the alignment that we want you to internalize? And so what this does is it plugs one of the major gaps, one of the major leakages from a simpler reinforcement learning schema, meaning that now the path of least resistance is to just be properly aligned, not to fake alignment, not to pretend to be aligned and still have ulterior motives, but to actually genuinely be fully aligned. And that's it. Now, this has very serious ramifications for models moving forward, particularly as we're entering into the autonomous agentic era, where you want to ensure that the model actually has the values that you think that it has. And an error rate of 0.4% or 0.3% is infinitely better than 13% or 8.7%. It's not ideal. Honestly, you probably want to get to the 4 nines or 5 nines or 6 nines success rate, meaning only like 1 out of a billion instances are misaligned. That is a pretty safe level, but if we go through this jump again, then yes, alignment, at least this kind of alignment, is for all intents and purposes solved. Now, I personally suspect, having looked through this paper and kind of shredded it with the help of AI and looking at it and what are the ramifications, also looking at OpenAI's recent anti-hallucination paper, what we're converging on is what I'm calling machine pedagogy, where not only are we learning to teach the machines the basic stuff, we're learning how to teach the machines the advanced stuff. It strikes me that this method here, where you have a training schema that says, nope, we're going to make you learn the right way. We're going to make you learn, show your work and make sure that you truly internalize the real rules that we want you to understand, the real principles. This will probably apply to every other domain in the grand scheme of things, including planning, math, science, and even more, emotional intelligence. Because instead of faking alignment, instead of using shortcuts, you're basically ensuring that these models no longer use any shortcuts whatsoever with their reasoning. Now, moral reasoning or ethical reasoning has a lot of properties that generalize to any other complex domain, such as being able to think through things, but also if you have an explicit set of rules or principles that you want it to learn, then as long as you have that specified correctly, this new training schema will ensure that it will learn to do math the way that you want it to do math, or medicine the way that you want it to do medicine, or coding the way that you want it to do coding, or even, or even finances. Because as you probably have also seen, Google DeepMind and others are now enabling agents to make payments to each other. So in that case, ethical alignment and rule-based values, or whether it's deontological or teleological, whatever, you really want to ensure that it's not going to misbehave at all. So mark my words, I suspect that this paper is going to have very important downstream effects, derivative effects in terms of, okay, cool, we're now graduating to the next layer of model alignment. Because remember, model alignment is not just, is it doing the values that you want, is it behaving as you want? Does it actually have the process and the methodology? Anyways, I'm repeating myself now. I just wanted to get this video out because I thought that it was a really important paper. So let me know what you think and have a good one. And if you don't mind, check out in the description, I've got my link tree up. I have all sorts of other offerings, Patreon with a Discord server, a couple other learning communities. I also offer one-on-one consulting and a few other things. So go check out my link tree, link in the description, and cheers. Have a good one.